the Democrats. There is an insanity, a conflicting ideology where fundamental principles are being thrown on their ear in the same excuse, for the most part, that socialists justify the seizure of their fellow citizens' rights and liberties and freedoms and money, because it's always about the money. And I've noticed this in particular during the Trump years, as not just Trump trade, which is ridiculous, but as the Keynesian Paul Krugman economic scheme, which was once debated and rejected by the Stephen Moores of the world, have now been adopted. And to prove my point in that, I just want to give you this real quick.
The NAFTA trade treaty, 850,000 jobs lost. Special trade status with China, 3 million jobs lost. Now the Trans-Pacific trade deal could cost America 448,000 more jobs. Only one candidate for president has opposed every disastrous
Who do you
deal,
think you're
Bernie
gonna hear?
Sanders. While others supported unfair trade deals, Bernie stood with American workers. He'll take on Wall Street and their trade deals because he doesn't take their money. For jobs, for us, Bernie.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
And that ad could have been for Donald Trump. That language, those accusations, those talking points are not just mimicked by those two buffoons, Diamond and Silk. Those are the talking points of the Trump Krishnas. That is exactly the kind of nonsense, the kind of circle logic and fundamental principle yoga you have to get into to justify Trumponomics and Trump trade in particular. And that has now become the argument of the Republican Party. And that's sickening enough, because the Republicans, those of us who are cursed with the ability to reason, we understand that the Republicans are just as, if not more corrupt, that the party of Hamilton, the protectionist party that the Republicans were prior to another, I think, president that misused power, Lincoln, and the Civil War, that those Republicans are the exact Republicans that are in charge now. The pretend Republicans, the corrupt Republicans, the Republicans that advocate government seizure and spending and control. This is always about control. And that we used to have one party that I never really said openly I'm affiliated with. I've been accused of this by listeners and everything. But the Libertarian Party has been kind of the turnbuckle to where people would go, well, oh no, you believe in complete and open freedom. And as I was listening, in particular, to the Illinois, there were a couple governor candidates running under the Libertarian ticket, I was recognizing the fact that they're pretty much in the mix as well of advocating for government revenue over citizen property rights. Because that's where we're at. This is now where citizens are advocating for government revenue, pretending that a rich government means a rich country, which is ironically exactly the opposite. That we have subconsciously subjugated ourselves to slaves, and that the government, most of which is embodied by these old, flaccid fossils who have been paid off for decades, they're now the ones that are going to control the internet. They're now the ones that are going to control trade. They're now the ones that are going to be in control of banking and interest rates. And I say often when I fill in for Joe Walsh, which I'll be doing tonight, we're not half of the men our grandfathers are. None of us. Not half of the men. We don't have half of the principles. We don't have half of the economic knowledge. And we don't have half of the fundamentals that made them kings of their castle. We don't want to be in charge of our lives, which is why we roll over like a trained dog and let Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or one of the other socialists rub our belly in the way we want. You are hearing zero principled arguments on the foundation of true Americanism from either party. That's why whenever I talk about Trump trade, I'm just going to play Bernie Sanders clips because they're the same thing. As I listen to Republicans come on and advocate for the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is a weapon created by government to be used as an extortion mechanism against business, as we pretend the Republicans have an idea of how to delegate market share any different, any better than the Democrats do. You don't. Why do you want to turn over control of macroeconomics to failures and to those whose job is to be paid off? Politicians have but one job, and that is to be paid off, to bring home bacon, pork barrel, whatever you want it, back to their little interests, their special interests, their contributors. That's what government has become. It isn't about you and me. In fact, you and me are the targets. We're simply the resistance to this government central economy that we all pretend is utopia. If only the Republicans are in charge of socialism, then it'll be great, which is why you advocate for a parent leave, for a new tweaking, a replacement of Obamacare, for a more efficient social security, for a more responsible debt. You're not advocating the principles of how we got here, why we got here, and how to make it stop. You're arguing management style. And to prove my point, I got in a little, I'm not going to mention his name because it's not fair. If he calls in, I would love it. It's 312-642-5600. A libertarian. This is a libertarian because most of the people who make up my Twitter and my social sites, Facebook and all of that contact me, they lean more towards a libertarian view until I hear them advocate for totalitarian tyranny. And they use the same exact excuses as the Trotskyite socialists we pretend are Democrats. They use the same verbiage of the Keynesian Fabian frauds like Trump and his ilk. They use the same thing. Their fair share is the argument. So let me bring you in on a little insight. We live in Illinois. Well, not really. I don't anymore. But those of us listening, most of us live in Illinois, and we are witnessing the government seizure of all of your rights, the doubling of gas taxes arbitrarily, the pick and choose mechanisms of sin tax as you release drugs and gambling into society. They go after tobacco and they go after alcohol, whatever the case may be. We are living under a government thumb in Illinois, and we are wiggling. Some of us are and some of us aren't. And when I hear libertarians advocate for massive license plate expense costs to those who buy electronic vehicles, and you hear them use the exact verbiage the socialists use when they go after our income, when they go after our insurance, when they go after our property, when they go after our assets of fair share, my head blows off because I can't believe that there is absolutely no alternative to servitude to a nation, to a government, that there is only management differences between all of the parties in play, that nobody is advocating for freedom. And they pretend and they stand the national anthem. Put your hand on your chest. Aren't you patriotic? And none of you know what patriotism is to a country that was born of anarchy. None of you understand that. Or very few, I should say. Very few. A very small percentage that is shrinking by the amount of Republicans that turn into Democrats like Donald J. Trump. Everybody goes, what are you, a never Trumper? No, I think Trump was the man. I would have loved to live like him. Kidding me? If I could get away with half those excuses to my wife, I'd be a lot happier. But you can't. And you can't get away with those excuses of socialism, of Paul Krugman economics, and keep calling it conservative. It doesn't fly to the people that can think. It's not right to advocate government revenue over citizen property and to be ignorant to the fact of how many of us are taxed on multi-levels for road use or road infrastructure or the numerous excuses that are used to go after your living. You live, therefore I tax. Electronic vehicle owners I've never been a big fan. I've recognized the subsidies and the scams, and the only reason Tesla had any market share at all was because they were held off competition, that various mega tariffs were put on foreign companies that produced a better, safer product for American consumers, that Tesla worked hand in glove with the government to keep out any kind of market share, that he worked hand in glove with the government to subsidize his particular vehicles. I am not a fan. It's a shame. I can also talk about the new Karma and how it is a wonderful culmination between Caterpillar and Fisker, whatever. It's a beautiful car, and I'm for freedom of choice. If you choose to buy an electric car, I don't think you should be subsidized. I think you should pay whatever the car cost is, but so be it. I'm not going to advocate that you pay $1,000 or $300 for your license plate to pretend that some sort of tax goes towards the maintenance of an infrastructure in which in Illinois we've already had a $31 billion infusion by Pat Quinn, and we're looking at another $41 billion by Jelly Belly Pritzker. Have those people paid for their market or their road use? Have they paid their fair share? Or has it just been so watered down you can't fathom that we're all paying for this abuse and that the Illinois infrastructure roads is a Ponzi scheme scam payoff to the politically connected and corrupt? So you're going to now argue for taxing electric vehicle drivers? There are no fundamentals. We are so unmoored from principles and from reality and from concept of freedom that we're not arguing about whether government should be in control. We're just arguing about how much control. You're not advocating that a few men in Washington should never have the power of a macroeconomic system like business interactions between American businessmen and whoever the hell they choose to do business with. You want these corrupt son of a bitches to control everything. You like it. You feel comfortable. You feel safe as you get in your bed at night. You have the mindset of a slave, whether you self-identify as a Democrat, which is a real lie to yourself, or another big lie, a Republican. And now the joke of all jokes is the libertarian. Now the libertarian advocates for government revenue and fair share systems. It's lost. It's lost. That's the point. And the rebuttal to it is what exactly? What is the rebuttal? No, my tyrant is better than your tyrant. My idea of government central control, that's better than your control. It's ridiculous to me. So now we have this decision-making of which old, unrealistic, unconnected to society and to people should be in charge of things. That's where we're going. It's going to be Trump or Biden or whoever. Doesn't matter. You're not advocating for the control. This last move by Trump, by the way, of which I'm going to talk about in depth on the Joe Walsh program tonight, this last move of threatening tariffs on Mexico because of illegal aliens is such an outrageous abuse of presidential power. He should be removed from office, and that is going to be extremely controversial, right? We're going to pretend, how could you say that? Aren't you a Trump guy? Aren't you a Republican? Do you love the Democrats? Are you witnessing that a president has decided that his definition of what should happen is, and he now has the power to harm each and every American consumer and American citizen in the name of his idea? That is the kind of thing that civil wars are fought over. Look at the Declaration of Independence, and please review the part about how the king stopped trade to the citizens. It was the wick of the Revolutionary War. And you, as so-called conservatives, have the audacity to sit idly by as one man misuses government power to affect macroeconomics nationwide. And this isn't just because I like avocado smashed toast. It is because no president and his upper echelon think tank, corrupt as they obviously are in Trump's case, have the power to control the macroeconomics of everything from agriculture to electronics and everything in between. It is a problem that I am listening to as I listen to the morning show, and callers who I have heard for years advocating for conservatism and for fiscal responsibility of a nation cheer as a president, a fiat president, seizes power never intended for the president to have. None of it. And I don't know if it's a historic ignorance or an economic ignorance that is guiding the citizenry, but it is sickening to me to think that conservatives, self-described constitutional conservatives, sit on their asses and put their feet up and pretend that good things are happening as a president arbitrarily raises tariffs, taxes on you, barriers to trade and freedom, the very thing that started the Revolutionary War. and you sit there and you pretend it's good, even if you agree with it and even if you benefit from it, you should have a principle and a fundamental that triggers in your head and says it's not right. That's how I used to laugh. The guys in my neighborhood whose fathers were crooks and gangsters and thieves. They walked around, they drove their new cars like they were men, like they were really men, benefiting from an entrepreneur and an honest guy. No, you're a crook who doesn't have the courage to be one. That's the kind of thing that's happening here in this country. You're a tyrant who doesn't have the courage to be one, so you endorse one. Or either that or you don't know what the definition of tyranny is. And you certainly don't know your history of who is in these offices. And I am not just talking about Donald Trump. Lighthouser was a lobbyist lawyer for steel and aluminum. Look, he is an economic advisor, the direct ear of the president. Peter Navarro, lifelong Democrat. Lifelong Democrat, wrote an essay on how Al Gore was the most relevant politician of our time. A man who's never done anything in economics except in a classroom, has never earned a dollar in trade. Nothing. He's a pseudo-intellectual faux professor who is imprinting kids with bad knowledge, the same thing we used to pretend we hated as conservatives. Then Stephen Mnuchin, my favorite, Liza Minnelli lookalike, money bundler for Obama, third-generation Goldman Sachs banker, corrupt bailout Keynesian fraud. And these are the guys you want to control trade policies of the United States of America versus the Congress, who was delegated by the Constitution to have that power, so we, the people, have direct access and representation in a republic. You're giving up the fundamental principles of not just capitalism and freedom and economics, but of the republic itself. And you're cheering it as on Mount High, everything is controlled by one man and his corrupt few. So don't cry victim anymore when Obama implements DACA, or when they cherry pick the tyranny of Obamacare, or when they advocate for universal care from soup to nuts, from cradle to grave, because you want in on that scam too. So now that we've established you're a whore, we're just talking about the price, right? That's what's happened to my country. And the Libertarian Party, I've got a guy advocating that that electronic vehicle users pay their fair share. You sound just like them. It's an eye-opening event to realize you don't have a political party, because no political party has a fundamental belief system, and none of them believe in the Constitution. In fact, all of them work to undermine it. If you've heard the calls and when I fill in on other shows, you know, from the minute a politician raises his hand and takes an oath to uphold the Constitution from threats foreign and domestic, they work to undermine it from the moment that hand goes down. And I've often wondered how they get away with it. I am now learning, because the citizens want it that way. You don't want the corruption to stop. You just want it to benefit you. And that's what Trump has shown me. Aside from the fact of just how corrupt the upper echelon of the powers that be are, as they rally, ironically, to impeach him on things he shouldn't be impeached for, instead of imposing the impeachment on what he's doing that's impeachable, which is a massive presidential seizure of our economy. But see, the Democrats can't do that because they agree with him. They agree with him.
The NAFTA trade treaty, 850,000 jobs lost. Special trade status with China, 3 million jobs lost. Now the Trans-Pacific trade deal could cost America 448,000 more
Trump
jobs.
Commercial.
Only one candidate for president has opposed every disastrous deal, Bernie Sanders. While others supported unfair trade deals,
hasn't.
Bernie stood with American workers. He'll take on Wall Street and their trade deals because he doesn't take their money. For jobs, for us, Bernie.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
That is a Donald Trump commercial. And I had another guy who constantly argues against free trade and controlled economics and government in control of decisions that should be made by the consumer to benefit the consumer. Another phony Trump Krishna who tweets, Ronald Reagan was the worst president that destroyed America. You notice the conflicting messages here? Because what they have to do is they're backhanded denying what Ronald Reagan really was principled. Now, he made some terrible decisions, most of which were extorted by George Bush Sr., may he burn in hell. Most of the bad decisions of the Reagan administration were because of the corrupt Bush family and their interwoven CIA skullduggery. That's the majority of the things that happened bad. But the reason Reagan was so loved and so admired is because he created a system of conservative, constitutional, economic principles, which is what spawned real growth versus this Keynesian manipulation of a stock market and a phony GDP number. Because there will never be a Trump yuppie. What Ronald Reagan did is make it easier for all of us to become entrepreneurs and businessmen and expand business and challenge true monopolies that only exist with government iron-fisted intervention. That's what Trump loves. He loves the Alcoas as they keep out the steel and the aluminum competition. He loves to point to the workers, I gave you these jobs, without letting them know they're phony, subsidized bullshit jobs. That's what American Steel is. As immediately after the tariffs were implemented, they increased their prices 22% instead of the 25% tariff. And the American Trump supporter put on his Caddyshack hat and said, thank you. Can I have another one? Why don't you take on the internet? Take on the internet. Too big, Google, too big. Yeah, without understanding what Google has done to your life, what it's done to benefit society. Too big. Google has massive competition. Do you know I don't even use it as a search engine? Do you? I don't buy their products. I don't take their apps when they say they could do it. No. That's my individual choice. But I would never advocate for a government bureaucrat waiting for his contribution to go after him. What kind of person does that? Are you just so ignorant you don't understand the politician is an extortionist? That the Sherman Antitrust Act, well, used as an excuse Rockefeller, who had over 300 competitors at the time. And Rockefeller, what he did for consumer pricing is the equivalent of what Google has done for consumer benefits of life and information. And how that is true progress, that it's brought down massive prices. Amazon has brought down massive prices to the consumer. I love it. I don't like Bezos, but I don't care. I love what he does for the consumer. And the idea that we pick and choose these companies because government and some fat-ass citizen who can't stand his wife or balance his checkbook somehow has the idea of how market share should be distributed by government oversight. I mean, what the hell is wrong with you people? Well, you're not going to get a lot of fans this way, huh, kid? But that's okay because it has to be done. It's not always about the numbers and the phony support if you have to sell a bullshit product. So if that's what you're after, you're not listening to this show anyway. And you might not want to listen to Joe Walsh's show tonight because I'm going after the same kind of thing. The bipartisan tyranny, the bipartisan manipulation, the bipartisan corruption that we call the American economy as we pretend it's capitalistic, as we pretend it's based on principles, when no one is advocating for the freedom of the consumer. No party is. You're just arguing about how much you should be controlled. And how much propaganda is the right amount? How many talking point arguments versus the principled fundamentals of the Enlightenment, which is what America is. It's an idea. It's an idea. And I hear the stupidity of I guess conservatives. I don't know. They call radio stations. They pretend they're conservatives. They tell themselves that so they can sleep as they say things like, get out of my country, without arguing what exactly is the point of why you're arguing against immigrants. What are you arguing against? Are you really arguing against the idea that immigrants who are under government tyranny in other countries should have a place to come? Or are you arguing because you want to protect your very own socialism, you greedy son of a bitch? Is that what you're arguing about? You want to protect your socialism that you don't deserve. Because if you've got kids and they go to a school and you pretend you pay because you pay your portion of your property taxes and the two old ladies across the street who've never had kids pay the same thing, you're a socialist and you don't have the balls to admit it. If you sit there and you pretend you're entitled to Social Security without recognizing it isn't anything but a Ponzi scheme that you're taxing generations working to pay off old people, then you have no principles. if you're arguing because you want Medicare and Medicaid and you want to go to the doctor because your ass hurts and you want to feel good about it and you don't want to pay for it, you're no better than Bernie Sanders or his supporters. You have one life to live. Don't live it as a coward. All right, now we got to do the Joe Walsh program tonight. I got to go open a cigar store. I'm going to leave you wanting more. And that's if you're still listening, which I doubt you are. But I will be filling in for Joe Walsh tonight, 5 to 7 live. Be sure and tune in and be sure to call in. And I didn't mention anybody's name on Twitter because I don't think it's right to mention names. But I do think it's important to recognize the direction of where these parties have gone, that there are but no differences in the Republican, Democrat, and now Libertarian Party. It's truly a disgrace for those of us who understand and pay homage to the Enlightenment, to freedom, to the individual property right over his life. You really don't want that. You just want to love your slave master. You want to pretend he's got your best interest at heart. And you lie to yourself when you pretend you're principled. Because sometimes when you have principles, even if it benefits you, you have to stand against it. Principles are a funny thing. It's like hair. You either have it or you don't. I'll be back tonight, Joe Walsh, 5 to 7. Thank you so much for listening.